Hey guys, Josiah here at easycaters.com. I wanted to do a quick recap of the last couple of days. I haven't done a video in a couple of days, so I wanted to catch up a little bit and show you some of the trades that I've done, some that I missed, and just maybe some signals out there to help, mostly for me, to help my own analysis, and in case you guys find these videos valuable for your analysis, hopefully that will help you out as well. If you guys are interested in this type of volume trading, volume-based analysis that I've been doing here. So yesterday, on Friday, I actually didn't take any trades, and we kind of just had this mostly sideways day all day long, and so I was sitting here watching this and doing some other work at my computer. And I just didn't see any really great signals, so I just didn't end up taking anything. And so, I think that's okay. And I think, sometimes, like, one of my weaknesses as a trader is that I have a tendency to not be aggressive enough. And so, perhaps that's one of the faults that maybe I missed some trades in here that I should have taken. But there's also days that your edge just isn't there, and you need to learn to recognize that and not take trades just out of boredom. So I believe that was the case yesterday, where I just I didn't see my edge show up anywhere in the stocks that I was looking at, and so I ended up just not taking any trades. If you see here in the early part of the morning, there was a little bit of a downtrend that developed before we kind of just fell into this range for the rest of the day. But in this downtrending portion, there really wasn't any great signal that happened. Maybe one right here with this weak bar right here, weak up thrust of a bar with a small topping tail, but then it didn't trigger immediately on the next bar, and this bar here was a higher commitment bar as it came up and closed this gap from the prior day. So I mean, this was a potential entry. It just wasn't that great, and and the stop would have been very wide, so I didn't end up taking that. When we had this move down, broke through the low, pulled back. We had some higher commitment come in here, so this is not really what I look for in a clean setup. And then we had a lower commitment pullback happen here, and the only really weak bar that showed up was this tiny green candle here, and it didn't trigger on the next bar. We came up here, had a red candle, then this would have triggered it in if you had taken that. And let's see here, this was a 67 by, I guess it would have been a 20-cent stop or so. So you could have taken this one. This one barely grazed the MA, and just again, it wasn't really that clean of a setup. The context of this pullback was not good, and so anyway, I didn't end up taking that one either. It just wasn't my type of setup that I look for. So you will see valid setups that are just not high quality, and so the probabilities are just not there. This here, where we had this high commitment, high volume sell-off, kind of stopping volume came in here and reversed us back up. We had this light candle, light volume candles, light commitment pullback here. This would have been a decent long, but I just wasn't looking long because of this context, and there wasn't a really good risk to reward setup right here because these candles are all wide bodies. So these I usually just ignore these light volume, light commitment pullbacks when they also don't give me, where it's valid in that way, but it's not giving me a high risk to reward setup, so it's just not attractive. If this had been a really narrow body candle, then that would have been a higher risk to reward, offering me a tight stop that would get to target really quickly, potentially. So that would have been a lot more attractive. But whereas this is a wide candle, it's just not that ideal of a setup. Your probabilities in trading are never going to be extremely high. So the one thing that you have some influence over is the selection of your risk to reward. So those are the two variables in trading: your probability of success and your risk to reward ratio. And I have the most control over the risk to reward ratio, whereas the probabilities, they're always going to fluctuate right around 50%. Sometimes you can get up to 70, 60, a lot of times down to 40 or 30. But as long as you have the right risk to reward ratio, you can make any of those systems work. And so I just have learned to ignore setups that don't have the good risk to reward. So I didn't take any entries here. Like I said, no trades on Friday. And then for the rest of the afternoon, it was low volume, chopping back and forth across the MA, just nothing interesting at all. On these types of situations, this would have been the one setup right here that were I trading a range type of approach to this analysis. If you see here, there's a high volume bar that comes in here, high commitment, high volume bar here, high commitment. And so these are telling you that this is the extent of the range for the day, or at least for a while. And so I'm looking at this, and I'm wanting to develop a system that will allow me to get in on these extremes and trade them on range-bound days, because range-bound days are pretty common. We tend to have them, maybe 2 to 3 of the 5 trading days per week. And so eventually I hope to develop a system that will be able to take advantage of those a little bit better. This was a nice pullback to VWAP. VWAP actually comes straight through here, and that topping tail crossed over VWAP and then closed back below VWAP. And so that was a nice little trade that took advantage of the pullback to VWAP, and this improved your probabilities of success with the high volume, topping tail, high commitment, large orders coming in, and it triggered you in on the very next bar. So this would have been a nice trade. But again, I'm trading this as a trend-based system currently, so the range-bound type of trade is something that I'm not trying to go after at this point. As far as on Thursday, there were a lot more trades to be taken on Thursday for a trend-based system. We had a nice downtrend all day, and here was your first entry, and this one got to, it looks like 3+ R's. This little entry here got to 2 R's and then trailed out your back half. And then this was the really nice entry for the day, as it kind of panicked out down into the afternoon here. But those were three really good entries. And then let's see, on Wednesday we had a few, and this is, so we had just kind of a range-bound morning, dropped below the low of the opening range, and it was immediately absorbed. had some high commitment come in to bring it up farther, low commitment pullback, low volume pullback. These got really low commitment down here as it came to the low. And so this would have been your first signal, like this narrow range body. And like I mentioned earlier, high risk to reward. This is both a really weak candle setup, really weak pullback, low volume, low commitment, and it has the high risk to reward. So you've got the odds stacked in your favor with a high probability of this not being able to hold, so a high probability that it will go to target. And then you've also got that coupled with a high risk or a high reward to risk ratio, where your risk is tiny and your potential reward is up here at the high of the day, which is many, many multiples of that risk. So that is a really ideal setup right there. It would just be better if it were in a stronger trending type of environment instead of this sideways movement that we're in. But that's a good picture of what you're really looking for here, and that stood out to me. Another setup here, and I really love these bottoming tails as well. These really indicate that there's rejection of those prices down there. The same thing came in here. This was not a picture perfect setup, but we had this low volume, low commitment red bar dropping down to these same prices over here, immediately absorbed, and then it triggered in. And we had these, this was a higher commitment but low volume pullback. Good risk to reward bar here on lower volume, decent, it's just basically average commitment. And then these really low puny bars here, low volume, light commitment down here. These were ideal entries as well. This one would have stopped. This one, depending on how you played it, would have worked because you wouldn't have triggered in on this bar, you would have triggered in on this bar, and then it never actually stopped you out at that point. This one went to first target. This one went to first target, and then kind of just drifted up all day. Same thing here. This one would have stopped, triggered you in, and then just kind of went sideways all afternoon. This was not an ideal setup, though, if you notice, and I didn't actually take this one either. We had this huge kind of climactic volume come in and climactic commitment with a topping tail, big square bar indicating there's resistance there, and then high commitment pullback. And so this is obviously not what we want to see. We want to see the weak pullback. This was kind of a strong sell-off. And so this would not really have been an ideal setup. It's perhaps valid, but this was not ideal enough for me to want to take it. And you can see why that's the case, because it just kind of slopped around all afternoon until we had some more context come in to tell us which direction to trade in. And this is the trade that I actually took in the afternoon. We had this sell-off below the range. We had this range kind of forming through the afternoon, and then we had this drop below and kind of a panic out. And then volume came in and commitment came in and absorbed all of that. And it closed near the top of the range. Then we had these kind of light follow-through candles, and then a strong takeoff here above these levels. And so when this light volume pullback came in, I was really looking for that, because this was my first signal that there was going to be a continuation of the morning's breakout over here. I was looking for a continuation later in the afternoon of that, after this overall larger trend pullback had finished. So that's what I took. I took it. I could have taken it on a break over this tiny candle, which would have been really nice. I wasn't fast enough to do that because it triggered immediately, as I remember. So I took it over a break of this bar, and so it went to, I think, to second target, and that was a nice trade. You could have also gotten in on this bar as a kind of anticipatory entry. right there, and that would have been okay too. I sometimes look for these at reversals because it seems when you have a reversal on strong volume like this, you have an early context of a reversal, then you have these light candles come in right at the MA. That's a nice little signal that if the downtrend doesn't trigger in, then there's likely downtrend traders in here that are going to get stopped out when you get triggered in here. So that's a nice setup to take to get to your target really quickly. So that would have been valid as well. I just didn't see it in time, but I was able to catch that second entry there. And then finally in the afternoon, you had this one last little pullback with a bottoming tail, low volume, low commitment. And I think that one got to the first target and then trailed out on the back half. So that was the last couple of days where I haven't done a video. I think I also took a trade that day on Macy's. I'm trying to remember right now what it was. Oh, it was right here. Yeah, so this is normally not what I look at or look for in a pullback trade, but because this was you can see all the candles are high commitment, high volume. That's because there's a lot of interest that suddenly came into Macy's on this particular day. And then so I was looking for not the really weak candles, I was just looking for weaker candles. So, whereas most of these are high volume, high commitment, these were lower volume, lower commitment. They were not what I would consider, super low and super weak, but they were weaker on a day like this where a lot of public interest is coming into the stock. They're just relatively weaker than what's going on around it. So I was able to take this on a break over this candle, and it broke in, triggered me in right there, and I had a nice trade up to second target there. So those were my trades last couple of days. I did want to show my results for the past, I guess, 4 or 5 weeks here that I've been trading this volume system. So week 1 back in April, netted 3.05 Rs, 3.31 Rs, 3.4 Rs. Last week we had a lot of range-bound activity, and like I said, my system is meant for intraday trend trading, so I only netted 0.68 Rs that week, and then this week 6.55 Rs for the week total. So the running total since last month was 16.98 Rs, and with a standard deviation of 2.09 Rs per week, and the average weekly gain of 3.4 Rs. So that's how the system's performing so far for me. I know there's a lot of subjectivity that goes in that. I look for different cues that I've just learned to look for as well over time, from just sitting here looking at the market all day and trading different other types of systems and so forth. So I admit that it's not a fully objective system, but it does get pretty close, and the entries are pretty objective when it comes down to it, because you're basically just looking for these weak candles at the MA that have touched the MA or crossed over the MA, and preferably have a bottoming tail of some sort, that type of thing. So it's pretty objective. When you've looked at these a few times, you can kind of see you can see immediately when they're happening, and it's not too much not too much thought that has to go into it. So anyway, I hope that helps. I wanted to show you that that this is actually getting some results for me, so I wanted to show those to you. And anyway, I hope these kind of reviews help you like they seem to help me. And if you find these videos valuable, please like and subscribe. Check out our website at easycaters.com if you want to get a hold of the relative time-based shares per trade indicator that I use here to highlight these bars. And I will talk to you next time. Thanks.